Unless you've been nutritious. You're from Albuquerque?
Albuquerque.
How long did it take? Jersey girl.
Yeah. So I left at 7.
Right.
And I got here at 3:30. So it would have been 9.
Do you
so
work
9
on the plane?
For some reason, my Wi-Fi wouldn't connect today. But like I had the slides, I looked at them.
I didn't either.
Because there was an agenda, as I understood it.
All right. Good evening, and welcome to the September 6th, 2018 meeting of the Planning Commission. Thanks for coming out tonight. Tonight we'll be hearing the staff report, applicant presentation, commission reports, and testimony for the Virginia Hospital Center site plan. This will be the only night for public testimony on this item. If you wish to provide testimony on the Virginia Hospital Center site plan this evening, please be sure to turn in your speaker slip to our clerk, Ms. Johnson, prior to the item being called, which she will do shortly. The Planning Commission will be discussing this site plan at our meeting on Tuesday, September 11th, and we'll be considering motions. Yep, sorry, is that better?
You're good.
All right. The Planning Commission will be discussing this site plan at our meeting on Tuesday, September 11th, and we will be considering motions at that time. There will not be an opportunity for public testimony at our meeting on Tuesday. Tonight, time permitting, there will be an opportunity for members of the commission to ask staff questions or flag issues for Tuesday's meeting. Again, we won't be debating, getting into discussions with staff, or considering motions this evening. There will certainly be ample time for that on Tuesday. I would also like to mention that the Planning Commission will be considering the rezoning and 2232 determination for the Salt Dome a week from today, Thursday, September 13th. So if you're here for that item, please come back a week from today. Prior to Ms. Johnson calling the first item, I would like to remind folks that we are both being audio and videotaped, so please silence your cell phones and keep them away from any microphones as they cause feedback. Finally, I would like to ask all participants tonight to stick to the time requirements. Ms. Johnson will turn on a timer when whether you're a speaker at the podium or an applicant this evening. We ask that everybody stick to those time requirements. We want to hear everybody's viewpoint, but to do so, everyone will have to respect those time allotments. Ms. Johnson and I will be really strict tonight on those to give everyone an opportunity to speak. That being said, if a person before you already said what you were going to say, please associate yourself with those remarks. You can also, as the county board does, encourage you to kind of lift an arm or stand when another person is speaking. That's a way for you to do that, and we can see your agreement with those remarks. So with that, Madam Clerk, will you please call the first item?
Our item this evening is the Virginia Hospital Center Site Plan 177 with 3 parts. Part A is Z-2606-18-1, B, Site Plan number 177, and C, U-2203-79-3, use permit. We have Matt Ladd and Dennis Sellon, staff, to present these items this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Ladd.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. As Giselle said, my name is Matt Ladd with the Department of Community Planning, Housing, and Development, and I will be presenting tonight's item, the proposed expansion of Virginia Hospital Center requested by the applicant, Virginia Hospital Center. The site plan area is bounded by George Mason Drive, 19th Street, Edison Street, and 16th Street North. It is located in the John M. Langston Citizens Association and is adjacent to the Tara Leeway Heights Civic Association and the Waycroft Woodlawn Civic Association. The total site area, including the Edison site, is 21 acres. You can see in the graphic above, the area outlined in white is the existing Virginia Hospital Center campus, and the area outlined in orange is the Edison site. And here is a closer view of the Edison site. It is 5.6 acres, a parcel owned by the county, subject to a land purchase agreement with the applicant. There are 5 buildings on the site, which were previously county buildings for the Department of Human Services. 4 of those buildings are vacant, and the 5th building currently contains the county's Head Start program, which is proposed to be relocated to a new building at 2920 South Glebe Road. Here are a few images of the Edison site, both around on George Mason 19th and Edison, and also an internal view of one of the buildings at 1800 North Edison. Just a little bit background on the land purchase agreement. In April of 2015, the hospital made a public appeal to the county board to consider selling the Edison site to them for the purpose of this expansion. There was a public process to review that proposal, which resulted in the county board approving a non-binding letter of intent. And then that was formalized with an option agreement a few months later in December of 2015. Part of the option agreement is a potential land exchange where the applicant would purchase the Edison site in exchange for land that Virginia Hospital Center owns. There was a community review process in 2017 to consider those sites. The Joint Facilities Advisory Commission recommended that the county board receive the Carlin Springs site owned where the current urgent care center is on South Carlin Springs Road, and the county board in July 2017 notified Virginia Hospital Center that it does intend to acquire that site as part of the purchase price for the Edison site. The general land use plan for this area, the entire site is planned government and community facilities, which includes both public uses and private uses like hospitals and institutional housing, nursing homes. And the hatching that you see on the Edison site just indicates that the site is currently publicly owned. The applicant proposes to rezone the site from its current S3A zoning to SD. Both of those zoning districts are consistent with the GLUP designation of government and community facilities. The site is surrounded on all sides except for one small corner with R6 zoned properties, which are primarily single family. And then the small corner is R8 at the corner of 16th and Edison. The applicant proposes to rezone the Edison site from S3A to SD. SD is a zoning district that is not frequently used within the county. There's only a few sites. The existing hospital is one. The Carlin Springs Urgent Care Center is another. There are a few senior housing developments that are zoned SD, but it is the zone that we generally use for hospitals and medical-related uses. The hospital also proposes to amend its existing site plan number 177 and its existing use permit to do 3 things. One would be to incorporate the Edison site into the site plan and use permit areas. 2 would be to redevelop that Edison site with a new outpatient building and a parking garage. And the 3rd would be to convert existing square footage within the existing hospital buildings that are currently used for medical office for outpatient uses to convert those to hospital inpatient uses. And that will allow for an expansion of inpatient uses as well as the expansion of outpatient uses. And those existing those existing outpatient uses that are within the hospital building will be relocated into the new building. Just a quick look at the site design. The outpatient building is proposed at 241,000 square feet at a height of 95 feet. It is 6 stories above grade with 1 story below grade. It is located at 19th and George Mason. The parking garage is located at 19th and Edison. It is 1,740 spaces with a maximum height of 67 feet, and it is 6 levels above grade with 3 levels below grade. Just looking at the proposed density and land use, the base FAR in the SD district is 1.0 FAR. There was previously some bonus density approved with a previous site plan amendment in exchange for the hospital's development and dedication of the Healing Garden on 16th Street. And the applicant with this site plan is requesting 50,000 square feet of bonus density for achieving LEED Silver with the outpatient building. So with that bonus density, existing development, and the proposed new building, it is within the SD zoning density requirements. Looking at transportation and vehicle access around the site, there are 5 total vehicle entrances to the hospital that are proposed. This is a reduction from 8 today, including the entrances to the existing Edison site. As you can see on the graphic, the red asterisks would be unrestricted access for the public, and then the purple areas would be restricted to employees or for service vehicles. There are currently 2 signalized intersections on George Mason Drive, one at 16th Street and one at the entrance to the existing hospital. And a third is proposed aligned with the driveway into the new parking garage. Some of the major improvements proposed and changes to the site include, as I mentioned, the consolidation of the vehicle entrances, revised street sections on George Mason Drive, 19th Street, and Edison Street. 19th Street is proposed to be widened from 30 feet, which is currently a 2-way yield street, so that 2 cars can't comfortably pass each other, with parking lanes on both sides of the street, and it's proposed to be 36 feet, so that 2 cars would be able to comfortably pass each other. Edison Street, the street section is not changing, but the applicant is proposing to build a new sidewalk on the opposite side, on the neighborhood side of the parking garage, and that would require shifting the street about 8 feet or so towards the parking garage within the Edison site property. Also proposed are wider sidewalks on all streets surrounding the site, including a 10-foot shared use path on George Mason and 6 feet on Edison and 19th Street. Safety improvements at North George Mason Drive and 19th Street are proposed, including rapid flashing beacons and a wider median refuge area within George Mason Drive. The applicant also proposes more bicycle parking, 150 employee spaces and 30 visitor parking spaces for the entire site, and improved facilities for bicyclists, which would include that the 10-foot shared use path on George Mason Drive, and up to 12 showers per gender and up to 300 lockers over the entire hospital campus. The applicant is also proposing to fund a new 15-dock capital bike share station, which would be located generally at the corner of 16th and George Mason. The applicant's traffic consultant, Wells & Associates, performed a traffic impact analysis for the proposed development. They looked at 16 signalized and non-signalized intersections, and while the project will add more traffic to the site, the TIA analysis shows that there will be little change in the level of traffic service on the major streets surrounding the site, although some intersection movements will degrade. Signalizing the proposed new entrance at the hospital is the principal traffic mitigation proposed for the project. Additionally, the applicant proposes to change signal timing and adjust signal phasing along George Mason Drive. The applicant is also proposing to lengthen the left turn lanes on George Mason Drive into the hospital site, including at 19th Street North, to improve the projected level of service. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the SD zoning district provisions. This is an area that is not within any of our sector plans or area plans, so we don't have that policy guidance that we typically have with a site plan project. What we do have in the zoning ordinance is specific guidelines for hospital uses. So the SD zoning, as I said earlier, allows for hospital and medical office uses. It requires site plan and use permit approval for those uses. We discussed the maximum density of 1.0 FAR. The maximum height is 10 stories or 95 feet. And there are 6 guidelines for hospitals that apply when the proposed development exceeds the prevailing FAR of the surrounding area. So that basically means the surrounding area is single-family homes, and the proposed development here does exceed that. So these guidelines do apply. The guidelines were adopted in a 1990 zoning ordinance amendment, and that was precipitated by a few hospital expansions. At the time, we had 3 hospitals in Arlington, one of which was the addition of the 1635 George Mason Drive building, which is the Virginia Hospital Center building at the corner of George Mason and 16th, which was approved in 1989. So following that, the county board recognized that there was a need for additional guidance for future hospital expansions, and a task force of neighborhood and hospital representatives, which was chaired by a planning commissioner, worked through about a 6-month process, as we do, to develop the guidelines. I want to direct you to a quote from the sort of preamble to the guidelines, which is, in judging the appropriateness of granting site plan approval, the following guidelines shall be considered. And if you read through the zoning ordinance, the term guidelines and shall be considered are not generally things that we see in there. So we as staff consider this to be policy guidance and not to be prescriptive, something that the county board has to find when it's making a land use action. It's not something that the county board would have to modify if it's not being met. It's a guideline. The first guideline is that building bulk and placement should be concentrated to have the least negative impact on the surrounding neighborhoods, and that deals with tapering the bulk, height, and mass from either the center of the site or an area of concentrated density on a master plan. The building line should be set back at least as far as the surrounding R zone properties. In this case, we are at R6, and that's a 25-foot setback. And then at the building line, the development should meet the height requirements for the surrounding properties, gradually increasing height to relate to the surrounding properties. And so that at the building line is a 35-foot height for those surrounding properties. So it's saying there should be a 25-foot setback, and then at that setback, the building line should, the building height should be 35 feet, and then it can taper up. The image on the left is the original proposal that was shown to SPRC, I believe in December, of the parking garage shown from 19th and Edison Streets. The image on the right is the most recent proposal that the Planning Commission is considering today at this same intersection. So the tapering of the garage has improved greatly from 3 stories stepping up to 8 stories. Currently, it is proposed to step from 3 levels up to 5 levels, and then ultimately up to 6 levels. Looking at the setbacks, these are the currently proposed setbacks on George Mason Drive. The building undulates in and out, and those setbacks vary from 28 to 43 feet from the curb. Along 19th Street North, it's 32 feet from the curb, plus we're also moving the curb in 6 feet to accommodate that widened street that I mentioned earlier. So it's about 38 feet from the existing curb. And then 19th Street along the garage is a 39-foot setback. And then again, with that 6 foot of new right-of-way, that's about 45 feet from the existing curb line. Along North Edison, we have setbacks of, this is the garage, of 42 to 44 feet from the curb. And then we've also added 8 feet new right-of-way to accommodate that sidewalk on the other side of Edison Street. The second guideline is to encourage placing parking underground where feasible. The hospital is proposing that 729 of its spaces are underground, which is about it's 42% of the total. And since the original submission in December, the above ground parking has decreased from almost 1,600 spaces to 1,011 spaces. The applicant has to provide a traffic mitigation plan. I discussed the traffic impact analysis earlier, and I'll discuss transportation demand management a little later. The applicant has to provide a master plan outlining future development for 5 years and a conceptual plan for the following 5 years. This is something that that was discussed at SPRC. The applicant showed a few iterations of a master plan, and staff pushed them a little bit further following SPRC to look even beyond what was shown at SPRC. And that was provided to the commission and has been posted on the website with the most recent August submission of the 4.1 plans. I won't go into detail of the proposal. I'll let the applicant do that. But it shows generally building another outpatient building on the Edison site, sort of tucked between the proposed outpatient building and the garage, a revamp of the central utility plant, a ring road that would go around the existing hospital site, and also shows the redevelopment, the future redevelopment of existing buildings on the hospital site. The applicant has to demonstrate medical need for medical offices, and particularly that the floor area for medical offices be substantially subordinate to hospital uses. The proposed use mix is 71% hospital and 29% medical office. And finally, the county board should consider the impact on continuous provision of medical services and facilities with these guidelines. For the public review process, there were 6 SPRC meetings between December and May. There was also a walking tour of the site. We also, prior to SPRC, held a kickoff community meeting at the hospital to discuss the process, the SPRC process, and how that would work. And then finally, after the SPRC concluded, there were 2 community open houses in June. And then also the Transportation Commission heard this item last night, and they voted to recommend approval. I believe the vote was 10-1. Some of the discussion areas at the SPRC, and I won't go through these too much because I know you'll have an SPRC report on Tuesday. They were the massing and placement of the buildings, particularly the heights and setbacks, the vehicular access points into the site, particularly looking at the new access points proposed on Edison and 19th Street into the garage, pedestrian connectivity both across and through the site. SPRC wanted to see some level of permeability through the site rather than just being able to walk around the perimeter of the Edison site. There was discussion of the proposed open spaces and the landscaping, particularly the landscaping within the setback areas, and also the long-term master planning of the hospital campus, as I just mentioned. We also, in addition to those SPRC concerns, heard a number of community concerns. The community members at the community meetings that we've held, and also through contacting staff and in meetings with staff, have also raised issue with the building massing and the setbacks, particularly that the setbacks provided on the Edison site are not as great as those provided at the hospital, the most recently built hospital building closer to 16th Street. There was concern about the amount of parking being placed above ground and if more of that could be placed underground. Concerns about the way the buildings look, the architectural and facade treatments, particularly within the neighborhood context and where the building entrance is, that is inward focusing rather than looking out, rather than being on one of the streets. Concern similar to SPRC of the buildings creating physical and visual barriers across the site. The concerns about increased traffic and then the location of the new traffic signal. We also heard concerns about pedestrian circulation through and around the site, particularly the intersection at 19th and George Mason Drive, where the applicant has proposed a rapid flashing beacon and the wider median strip. We also heard at the community meetings a number of operational issues about the existing hospital relating to the way that the current service areas are screened or not screened, concerns about cigarette butts around the site, things of that nature. And we also have heard concerns about impacts on the stormwater system. We've also received letters of support from the community, and those generally, if I could paraphrase them, tend to focus on the need for hospital expansion, that a hospital is at or over capacity today, particularly the emergency department, the need for the hospital expansion to keep up with the county's population growth, and then also related to the parking garage, the current need for parking today with the existing hospital and the inability for patients to find parking for their appointments and needing to use valet services. So there's support for the parking garage to reduce that demand for parking. And finally, we received many letters of support on the proposed behavioral health expansion that I will discuss in just a minute. And we also heard some concerns from the behavioral health advocates that adolescent needs are not being addressed with what the hospital is proposing. To go through the site plan features and improvements proposed, we have gotten, as you know, we have the standard site plan conditions, and we're receiving most of those as appropriate for a hospital use. We're also, the applicant has also agreed to a number of site-specific conditions that I'll mention a few of those. I mentioned previously the new sidewalk that is off-site on the other side of Edison Street. That's 765 linear feet. There's also, I mentioned the 10-foot wide shared use path. For the capital bike share, the applicant proposes both to fund the capital construction or installation of that and also operations and maintenance for a period of 10 years. And the applicant has agreed to screen the existing waste storage area, service area on Edison Street, and that's something that they've agreed to do prior to getting any demolition permits for the site. The applicant is committing to a modernized transportation demand management program that covers not just the Edison site, it would cover the entire campus, and it would replace the existing transportation demand management program, which dates back to 2000. Some of the highlights of this are a full-time on-site TDM coordinator, a parking cash-out program, and if you're not familiar with that, it's a program that would provide a cash or transit subsidy to commuters who do not drive alone, and that it would be an equal value to the free parking that employees currently receive. So if you choose not to drive and park, there will be a cash or transit or other subsidy that's equivalent value to the people who do park and receive free parking. The applicant's proposing a pre-tax commuter benefits program, 150 Class 1 bike parking spaces, and then this TDM program would be implemented early. Usually we wait until the proposed building is occupied, but since the applicant currently has thousands of employees on the site. It's something that they can do as soon as the site plan is approved, and they've agreed to do so. The applicant's proposing public art contribution. I mentioned the LEED Silver certification. In relation to the master plan, and I imagine this will be an area that the commission has some discussion on Tuesday, the applicant has agreed to submit a phased development site plan with its next major site plan amendment. So that would allow, and whenever that happens, it would allow for this review process to no longer happen on a building by building, phase by phase basis. The county would be able to look at a longer range master plan for the site and approve that, and then approve the individual phases for consistency with that site plan, with that phase development site plan. Applicant also has agreed to have a community liaison who neighbors could call with operational issues, and that there would be quarterly meetings, not just during construction, but post-construction and for the life of the site plan to address any concerns that come up with the operations of the hospital. And finally, the applicant is committing to an expansion of behavioral health services. This is outlined in condition 66. It includes an increased number of psychiatric beds, redesigning the behavioral health space within the hospital, redesigning the emergency department space to better serve psychiatric patients, implementing an outpatient behavioral health program within Arlington County. So that would likely be something that's off-site in another building, but it would be an outpatient service for people with behavioral health needs. And finally, quarterly meetings with county staff to discuss the behavioral health services that are provided. The applicant is requesting a number of modifications from the zoning requirements, green building bonus density, which is consistent with our policy and our practice for LEED Silver certification. In addition to achieving LEED Silver for the outpatient building, the applicant is committing to integrate sustainable design features into the garage, including meeting specific LEED criteria such as heat island reduction for the garage, which there's no LEED category for parking garages. Density exclusions consistent with county practices for below-grade mechanical and equipment rooms. The loading space of one loading space is required for the outpatient building, and the applicant proposes to use its existing loading dock for the larger box trucks, and then use smaller vehicles to transport items to and from the new building and its existing loading dock. Parking was one of the major issues raised by staff and SPRC early on in the review process, particularly the size of the parking garage and the number of spaces proposed. Over the course of the process, the applicant reduced the number of spaces by about 300. With this reduction, the total proposed spaces for the entire site plan, so that's the garage and all the other parking areas, is below the minimum requirement of the zoning ordinance, and that requirement is based on the square footage for the medical office building and also the number of employees and doctors within the hospital. Staff believes that the proposed number of spaces provides a balance between meeting peak parking demand on-site and also mitigating the massing impacts of the garage. The applicant is also requesting a modification of the compact space requirements. For most land uses, up to 15% compact spaces are allowed, but for hospital uses, the zoning ordinance allows no compact spaces. So the applicant is requesting to provide about 20 out of the 3,772 that are being provided, so a little less than 2% with the new garage. Also, I mentioned the service area along Edison Street that we heard some community concerns about, that it's not properly screened. So the applicant has proposed to screen it and landscape it, but the proposed wall height of 10 feet exceeds the maximum height in the zoning ordinance. So that would be something the county board would need to modify before they could get the permits to to implement that. Finally, staff recommends approval of the rezoning request from S3A to SD. Staff recommends approval of the subject site plan amendment, including the modifications I just mentioned, subject to the conditions of the ordinance. And staff is recommending approval of the subject use permit amendment to incorporate the Edison site.
Thank you, Mr. Ladd. Mr. Sellon, do you have a presentation, or are you just here to answer questions?
I do not have a presentation.
Thank you. Ms. Walsh.
Hi. Vice Chairman Troll, members of the commission, for the record, my name is Nan Walsh, and I'm really pleased to be here this evening on behalf of Virginia Hospital Center. With me from the hospital are Adrian Stanton, right there, Vice President, Charles Fletcher, Head of Operations, and Mike Killian, our project manager. All of our consultants are here. We know we're not answering questions tonight, but we all wanted to be here to hear all of the community testimony so that we're prepared to answer the commission's questions. Everyone knows this applicant. It is Virginia Hospital Center, which is a not-for-profit hospital that's been serving Arlington County in the region for over 73 years. This hospital is the only one that has survived in Arlington County, as Pentagon City Hospital, previously National Orthopedic, Northern Virginia Doctors Hospital, previously Vencor, and Circle Terrace Hospitals have all long been gone. As 77% of Arlingtonians receive their inpatient care at this hospital, and 83% of Arlington residents' babies are born here, this application is undoubtedly very, very important to the Arlington community at large. Relative to repositioning the campus for the near and far future, Virginia Hospital Center has 5 primary goals with this application. First is consolidating outpatient facilities and medical offices in the new outpatient pavilion building on the Edison site, which is at the north end of the campus. This in turn frees up space in our 1625 building, which is the main hospital building, to accommodate inpatient needs. Consolidating and expanding inpatient facilities in the 1625 building, which is at the south end of the campus. This begins our reorganization of the campus by separating the in- and outpatient facilities for ease of use by our patrons and visitors. The freed up space will be used to house the projected needed 101 needed licensed beds for cancer, cardiac, and stroke patients, to provide inpatient capacity for behavioral health services, both psychiatric and addiction treatment, as well as the expansion of the emergency department. Bed occupancy at this hospital has exceeded the 80% threshold for 90% of the year, year after year. The hospital often has to board patients because there are a lack of available beds in the emergency department. Thirdly, to create an empty chair. This is a pad site that can be used over the long term to accommodate new buildings as we have to take down the older ones that are located in the center of the site. 7 of the 10 buildings that currently reside on the hospital campus were built between 1957 and 1983. 2 of those buildings are now over 60 years old. Fourth, building enough parking to accommodate current parking deficiencies, moving all our employees on site, removing the green garage in the future, and providing convenient, easy-to-use public parking for the new services in the outpatient pavilion. Today, the hospital is at a significant competitive disadvantage by inconveniencing nurses and other staffs who have to park in off-site lots and be shuttled to the campus. The hospital is also at a significant competitive disadvantage in requiring patients and visitors to park in a garage, one of which is 6 levels below grade. This is the biggest complaint that the hospital receives. So providing less intimidating, easier to use above-grade parking will definitely improve the patient experience. And finally, putting Virginia Hospital Center in a better position to compete with the growth in services provided by other hospitals in the region. So what are we up against? Inova Fairfax Hospital has 9 times the acreage of Virginia Hospital Center. 192.9 acres versus our 21.6, and that includes the Edison Street site. They have 2.5 times the amount of parking, and they have 2.5 times the amount of inpatient beds. In addition to what I've outlined, the hospital was very deliberate in designing the outpatient pavilion. It has to function not only from the outside in, but more importantly, from the inside out. Unlike almost all the applications that this commission sees, this critical building is not in any way speculative. It has and must have a program-driven design. You'll see that the hospital's using the lower levels of the building, and those are the ones with the larger footprints, to lay out the outpatient facilities and care. These include outpatient surgery, physical therapy, women's imaging, lab, endoscopy, and our MRIs. The lower levels also contain our community facilities, which include the pharmacy and the cafe that will be open to the public. The upper levels will contain some other outpatient services, such as cardiac clinics, physicians' offices, and oncology. The outpatient pavilion is a very complicated building. It needs to address patient flow and privacy, separating waste garbage management from patients, addressing infectious disease through special ventilation, and separating high-risk patients such as oncology from others. The key issues raised and addressed by the hospital as a result of the 3 community forums and the 6 SPRC meetings. Let me try to quickly encapsulate those. Regarding setbacks, the proposed parking garage and outpatient pavilion achieved a layered setback approach, thus pushing the massing toward the center of the site as required by the zoning ordinance. Along 19th Street, the parking garage now has 2 tiers of setbacks, resulting in the taller element being set back 141 feet from the nearest home. On Edison, there are 3 tiers of setbacks, and the taller element is located the closest point 223 feet from the nearest home. The outpatient pavilion also has a lower podium element, which rises to a taller element that is 165 feet from the nearest home on 19th Street and between 160 and 177 feet from the nearest home on George Mason Drive. These setbacks represent a distance as much as 3/4 the length of a football field, or, and I had it measured, 5.5 times the length of the width of this room. For comparison, the single-family homes that were just built behind the new Hyatt at Courthouse, there are 5 single-family homes. Those homes are located, and the garage is 30 feet from the 103-foot-high Hyatt Hotel, just to give perspective on setbacks. Regarding building height, the parking garage has been reduced in height at all levels, including off the top and with the introducing of tiering. The result? The highest element is now only 5 floors or 67 feet. For comparison, this is 1/2 the height of the main hospital building, the 1625 building, and it is the same height as the adjacent 1715 building. Regarding parking, the massing and size of the parking garage has been attacked on 2 fronts. First, the hospital added a 3rd level of underground parking, taking it out from the above-grade structure at an added cost of $3.8 million. Secondly, we implemented an outright reduction in parking, removing 347 parking spaces from the above-ground garage. The result? 42% of our parking is now underground. The overall campus, as Mr. Ladd noted, is now parked well below the zoning ordinance standard, but hopefully with our TDM measures, it will operate and function properly. On TDMs, they're very, very tricky when you're dealing with a staff that has shifts and often works the entire night. This is a hospital, it's not an office building located near a metro station, but the hospital has nevertheless agreed to a number of unique measures that will hopefully encourage access to this hospital campus by modes other than automobile. On permeability, the hospital is requested by the community has introduced both an at-grade east-west connector and a north-south connector to provide ease of access through the campus by our neighbors. In addition, there's an elevated bridge connection from the new outpatient pavilion and garage to the balance of the hospital campus. On open space, you'll see that 1.36 acres of the 5.5-acre site, or 25% of it, has been designed as open space areas of refuge and calming for patients and visitors, as well as extensive buffering toward our neighbors. So in summing up, this application, like many that come before you, requires a balancing of many factors. The impact on the immediate surrounding neighborhood is, of course, a critical one. There's no doubt about it. And that was the primary, if not sole, focus of the Site Plan Review Committee process. But there is another, which is considering the health care needs of the community at large. The reality is that 115,000 Arlington residents are served by this hospital each year, and the population is projected to grow an additional 30% over the next 15 years. Virginia Hospital Center is not only Arlington residents' primary health care provider, but it's also a significant economic driver for Arlington County and its residents. It's the third largest employer in the county, which surprised me. It has over 3,000 employees. With the 400 new jobs generated by this outpatient pavilion building, we will annually be providing for $230 million in salaries and benefits. And the highest percentage of these employees are Arlington residents. Virginia Hospital is a special and important contributor to the fabric of this community. It is truly one of a kind. This hospital is the provider of over $40 million per year in true community benefits. These are benefits that really matter. You don't see these kinds of benefits. These are financial and other support above any legal requirements to the Arlington Free Clinic, the Pediatric Clinic, and the outpatient clinic, as well as providing free community health screening and educational outreach, and in charity care. And over and above that, an additional $7.5 million in uncompensated care to patients who can never be turned away. And thankfully, your zoning ordinance captures the balancing that needs to occur by the Planning Commission in considering this application. It is very specifically laid out in Section 4.3.3D of the Hospital SD Zoning Ordinance section. It states the following: the impact on the continuous provision of medical services and facilities shall be considered when using these guidelines, those of the SD, to evaluate new development. Thank you for your attention. Always, I want to turn it over to Jim Henry. He's going to review a few slides, and then Adrian will close for us.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
Great. Just need to get the clicker real fast. I'm a little taller than Nan. It'll be a second, excuse me. So it's good to see many of you again. For the record, my name is Jim Henry. I'm the design lead for this project with HDR. I'm also our regional director of health for our practice. I want to give a little context about HDR before we get into going through some of the slides. I think it's important just to understand our perspective in this and coming in as a partner with Virginia Hospital. We are an over 100-year-old firm. We are founded in 1917 with a major bulk of our business is in healthcare. We have designed over 140 million square feet of healthcare over the last 5 years. And finished over 280 projects, healthcare projects last year alone. We've been in the DC metro area for 30 plus years. We have our offices in Arlington, and we have around 180 staff that are in our Arlington office, of which 60% of those are patients at Virginia Hospital Center. So you can see that we have a vested interest not only in the hospital, but we are the healthcare leaders in architectural design as well, and that's globally recognized. So I just want to put that in perspective as we get started. I want to say that the bulk of the presentation that you'll see is going to reference a lot of the description that you heard from Mr. Ladd and from Ms. Walsh regarding the benefits that have happened because of the SPRC. I think that the SPRC process, if you look at where we started and where we are today, the benefit is seen in that process and what we've done and what the hospital has done to listen, to react, and to provide what we think is a good solution moving forward as a neighbor. So the area that we're talking about obviously is the Edison site expansion. You heard Ms. Walsh talk briefly just about the need. And I think this is something that's important to understand, is that it's not only about creating a place to expand, but it's actually enables the expansion internal to the site as well. So there's an inpatient need that's growing on the hospital, and by us being able to remove the outpatient functions that are currently inside the hospital out into the expanded Edison site area, we're actually able to expand the resources within the existing hospital. We're also seeing around the nation a global expansion to move outpatient outside the walls of an inpatient hospital. This is for expanded and ease of access for patients. It's to align a better cost of delivery in a right location. So instead of having expensive cases being done inside a hospital, it's to align that in an outpatient setting, and it's for efficiency. So all of those things are being considered as we're looking at the expansion of the site. We heard about the many functions that are happening. Wanted to show exploded axon here and talk a little bit about what functions are happening inside. On the lowest level, and as you heard, that we are actually pushing one level below grade within the facility, taking advantage of the slope of the site. We have physical therapy and occupational therapy on the lowest level, as well as food service and dining that has access to a sunken garden. We also have some mechanical space that's been pushed in there that was recognized by Mr. Ladd. On the first floor is our primary access floor, so ease of access is very important, so transparency and visibility from patient perspective is important, as well as the turning movements for drop-off and access. So what we propose to do is on this floor is have programs that are usually more quick in nature. So you have access to diagnostic imaging, specific women's imaging. We also have lab functions and pharmacy. And this floor is also connected at the same level for people that park in the garage to be able to walk in. So ease of access and circulation is paramount in making this a functional medical office function. On the second floor, we have surgical services as well as minor procedures. And so this is a longer length of stay procedure. Located, we have 6 operating rooms, 1 interventional radiology rooms, as well as a host of minor procedure rooms. From there, as we move up into the taller portion of the building, as Nan pointed out, the more slender portion and step back area of the building is our clinic areas. And so we have around 170 clinic exam rooms within that portion of the building, including the top level that will also house infusion therapy for oncology. Sorry, I failed to mention that on level 2, we'll have also a bridge connection that connects back to the 715 building that will then connect back to the rest of the hospital. So there is an internal connection to be able to move from one end of the hospital to the outpatient center without going outside. So ease of access for patients as well as staff. This is the main lobby. So I talked about the importance of having a very open and accessible lobby. If you can imagine here to the right of the screen where the glass is, that's going to be looking out to the drop-off area. So visibility and the ability to orient yourself as a patient is very important. So access to natural light as well as being able to see where I've come from is very important. So we have a very transparent face here looking out to the entry plaza. We've got an area here for waiting, as well as behind those walls you see access into women's imaging directly there to the left. Further down throughout the hall there, if you were to walk straight down this hallway, you would have access to other imaging functions, other modalities like MRIs, CTs, nuke med, fluoroscopy. And then you also have the 2 functions in closest proximity to the parking garage that would be your lab and your pharmacy. It's a 2-story volume, so we have visibility and sort of creating a nice environment for patients as they're waiting. On the second floor there is your access to the surgical waiting. So on level 2, you look down is surgery waiting. So ease of access wayfinding is paramount throughout the design of this project. We saw on the descriptions on the outside of the building and what we have done to mitigate many of those issues from the very beginning. The piece that you're seeing here is a 2-story element, both that was the imaging and the surgery functions as it presents itself to the 19th Street corner of 19th and George Mason. On the corner there, we lightened up the facade by bringing more glassy open area. This is actually inside. This is an amenity function for the staff as lounge 19th Street for a walkable campus. We've also, through the process of the SPRC, we've broken up the facade. We changed materiality. We're working to try to create a rhythm that is in relationship to the houses that are on the other side of the street. So this is a dialogue between our building and the rest of the campus. On the lower level of that same facade, if you were inside the building looking out onto 19th Street, this would be the function that's in the lowest level. So this is your rehab gym area. So we talked about having physical therapy and occupational therapy in the lower level. We are taking advantage of pushing one level of the building below ground, and you see borrowed light there coming in from the exterior. So making sure that we have access to natural light and some visibility of nature. Both are evidence-based design features that we want to make sure we focus on. Women's imaging is a big piece of this project as far as creating access, creating more availability of women's diagnostic functions. And this is a key function that will happen on the first floor. As you moved around the building, as you moved further up 19th Street, one of the recommendations or the request was to create a pathway between the buildings to allow east-west movement across the site. We've created an opening that is a covered opening. We'll show another slide here later, but it's a covered opening that will allow people on the 19th Street side to move east-west without going around the site to address that earlier concern. You're also seeing continued breaking up of the facade and stepping back of the facade to meet the recommendations of the SPRC and the proposed guidelines. Interior to the hospital on level 2, we talked about surgical functions. We're going to have 6 modern outpatient ORs. This again allows us to align the right level of care to the right location. That is a medical dummy for the purposes of the rendering. It's not a person, so I saw your reaction there, Nancy. Yeah, well, it's what happens in ORs. So what we want to show, though, is that there is access and increased access for patients coming to this facility, not needing to then be tied up in the existing facility, all again creating better access and more efficiency. We talked about we talked about the access for exam rooms. Again, the building itself is proposed to have around 170 exam rooms, all with a modern design. And I don't mean just by the aesthetics. The way that it's laid out allows for a reorganization of an onstage, offstage, which helps with decreasing anxiety and creating a more calm environment for patients. It's been listed as a Virginia Mason model of design that allows you to have an offstage and an onstage. It's been tested, and then the hospitals actually put this in place, and we've improved on that model over time. It's going to have access to technology so that they can do web consults outside of the facility, as well as access to patient education. The other things that we're looking at is eye-to-eye contact for patients that are in the exam room. So instead of trying to create an environment that is separating, in many cases you see in existing facilities, this creates a more intimate relationship with the caregiver and the patient. On the opposite side of this wall, you would see an offstage area, which would be the actual caregiver stations, decreasing that clutter and noise and moving that off-site or off-stage. On the top floor of the building, we have oncology and infusion therapy. And so we do have access, we have comfortable seating, we have both a mixture of open and closed infusion therapy bays, and plenty of access to natural light. As we talked previously, I don't need to go into detail about this, but this is demonstrating the setbacks. We actually are 3.5 levels below grade. We're 5.5 levels above grade of parking. through the process, we've reduced the total height of the building by 2 levels, including reducing parking. We've increased the setback. We've also gone through the exercise of breaking up the facade via materials, and all of those things were important in order to sort of meet the requirements and the recommendations of the SPRC process. One of the other recommendations was a north-south access, being able to move from the George Mason side to the Edison side. So we've got a garden alley that cuts through between our facility, the Edison site, and the green garage, then makes that connection back up through the site. What you're seeing here is the front access, the view of the building. I talked a lot about access, visibility, connections to nature, open space. Those are the things that we've talked about, and the design works with that. The design, in the way that it is set up on the site, allows easy access to parking. So a lot of patients will go directly into the parking garage. Those that'll be dropping off, it works in a counterclockwise fashion, which will allow the patients to be dropped off on the right-hand side and then be redirected back into the facility. This patient turning movement is very safe and one that we see implemented around the country. The building itself is oriented with the long faces running along the north and south, so we are minimizing the east-west exposure. So we talked about how do we get LEED, silver, how do we create a building that is high performance. It's by aligning the building and letting the building do what it's meant to do as far as reducing the heat load on the building. We've also aligned the window wall ratio, reducing the amount of glazing, also controls light spillage. We've increased or aligned the type of materials that we have on the building, as well as worked with the connection between the interior and exterior, where waiting is, connecting that to the green space. This is just a brief image here that just shows circulation through the site. The entry gardens, the plaza, the welcome gardens. Nan talked about the 25% green open area, and that's illustrated in this diagram. And then we have a couple of images here that just show the quality of the space, both for the entry garden and the lower sunken garden that would be accessible for food service. Okay.
Just a couple of closing comments. I'm Adrian Stanton, Vice President. Today, Virginia Hospital Center is the only hospital still serving the county. We received national recognition for healthcare excellence, and we have brought that excellence and collaborative efforts, like the one we have with Mayo Clinic, to the community. Our proposed expansion directly addresses the critical needs of our cardiac, stroke, cancer, mental health, and emergency patients. We have looked at many different solutions, and what we have put forth is the best plan for our patients. We believe it's the best plan to facilitate the future needs of those we serve, and it ensures that we do so in an efficient and well thought out manner. It will enable VHC to continue to be the region's value provider. By this, I mean the hospital with the highest patient satisfaction, the highest quality of care, and at the lowest cost. We are the only independent hospital in the region, and it's our board's goal that we continue to stay autonomous and to remain in Arlington. Next year, we celebrate our 75th anniversary, and Virginia Hospital Center's mission has been to act in the best interest of each patient we serve. We believe this project continues our mission to do what's right for our patients. We are honored and proud to serve the community with nationally recognized care for the past 75 years, and we thank you for your review, for we believe this plan will enable us to continue our mission for the next 75. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. Thank you for the applicant for the presentation. Thank you, Ms. Walsh. All right. Now I'm going to go to any commissions who have reports. I see Mr. Ross here. Mr. Ross, would you like to come forward? Are there any other commissions here this evening? I know TC will give one. Thank you, Mr. Ross.
Thank you. Bill Ross, the chairman of the Park and Recreation Commission. The commission members have followed this process, and we've produced a letter, which we're still doing a little editing on, and we just wanted to offer some of our thoughts. And first of all, we fully support the expansion of the hospital and the associated additional services that it's going to provide. But we have several concerns about the proposal, namely involving detrimental open space effects, environmental impacts, and overall an inability to blend in with this neighborhood. Despite some of the modifications we've seen, the garage structure will create a dominant edifice still that will detract from the residential experience for those residents who are, especially the ones who are on Edison, 19th, and George Mason. Just one perspective I have on impacts of recent county proposals, thinking about things that you all know about: Williamsburg field lighting, the 4-mile Run Valley process, Fire Station 8, and various site plans. And I'm just myself looking at it, I'm not sure if I've seen a bigger negative impact on the residential experience than what this expansion is going to do. There's some fairly modest attempts for cushioning of trees and other plantings we've seen, but no real attempt to offer green roofs or green walls or some modern types of design, landscape design approaches that I think have been really good in these types of institutional settings. We still have an issue with the superblock effect that's not completely mitigated by well-designed circulation pathways. The central court looks really nice, the designs we've seen, but we can bet it's going away by future development. And so thinking of it come from a long-term plan, our concern is that if it's important to develop this court for the benefit of the hospital and the neighborhood, then how is it going to be a good idea to get rid of it in the future? Because that seems what the implications we've heard are. Now, we know that this architect and landscape architect have designed much more pleasing institutional campuses in this area, and it'd be nice to see some of that. And given these concerns, we'd hope that the proposal can be deferred until some modifications that might deal with some of these issues can be made. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. My turn now. All right, thank you, ma'am. Will you, ma'am, can you please come to the microphone? We need everybody speaking tonight to be speaking at a microphone as we're being recorded and taped.
The Community Service Board is also here. I'm Ann Herman, chair of the board, and we have a speaker, Judy Dean.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Community Services Board. We are this citizen volunteers who oversee public mental health, substance abuse, and intellectual disability services in Arlington County. The Arlington CSB strongly supports the expansion because we believe that the recommended commitments on behavioral health to be made by VHC as part of the site plan agreement will provide a major and much-needed community benefit by improving the care available in Arlington for people suffering mental health crises. For many years, local families have expressed concerns about a shortage of psychiatric beds at VHC and conditions in the psychiatric ward. Individuals in crisis often have to wait in the emergency room for long periods or are turned away altogether, forcing them to seek treatment in faraway hospitals outside the community. The hospital's expansion provides a rare opportunity to expand and improve mental health services for Arlington residents. The CSB has convened stakeholders and worked closely with Adrian Stanton and VHC staff for the past year to forge an agreement on these issues, most of which have been incorporated into the draft site plan conditions. Now that we've had the opportunity to review these site plan conditions, we're generally very satisfied with them. We have a few technical fixes that we will be presenting in writing, but we also have 2 issues of substance that we would like to address in order to make a good agreement even better. Let me start off by highlighting the commitments that have been agreed upon. First and foremost, VHC has agreed to a formula and methodology to determine how many additional behavioral health beds are needed by the community, and VHC is committed to seeking state permission to open these beds in a new and improved inpatient ward as part of the renovation of the current hospital building. This is a formula rather than a specific number because it won't actually happen for several years and will depend on what the data show at that time, but we expect it to lead to at least a doubling of the current number of beds available for psychiatric patients at VHC. In addition, a number of other important steps will be taken. The psychiatric ward will be expanded with best efforts to ensure single rooms, access to outdoor light, and natural light, access to outdoor space. The emergency department expansion will include a mutually agreed upon design and operational plan to better serve patients in psychiatric crisis, and VHC will develop a new intensive outpatient behavioral health program. But even though this is a good agreement, there are two areas where we would like to see amendments in the site plan conditions. First of all, in the CSB negotiations with VHC, it included additional language on the outpatient behavioral health center, which was not incorporated into Site Plan Condition 66F. We recommend that this language be added. Quote, "To the extent feasible, this center shall include measures to welcome walk-in patients, patients referred by primary care practitioners regardless of the patient's insurance status, local CSB referrals, and patients ready for discharge from VHC's inpatient unit." And we would like to see this language restored to the text because it is so important for the community that individuals not be denied access to essential psychiatric services because of their insurance status or lack thereof. The second concern that we have is that Virginia Hospital Center has not yet agreed to make any contribution to improving mental health services for children and adolescents, even though their staff, the CSB staff, and families all agree that this is an important unmet need in Arlington. We understand that VHC does not have a pediatric specialization and therefore could not establish an inpatient psychiatric ward for children, but they could, and we believe that they should, help to serve this population by supporting the CR2 Mobile Crisis Unit for Children that is already established but is not sufficiently staffed to answer the needs of Arlington's children. We think this is very appropriate because a major purpose of the CR2 program is to divert children from hospitalization. Therefore, this is exactly the population that VHC would likely be serving if they had an inpatient psychiatric unit for children. And so we do encourage VHC and county staff to keep working on this issue. I do want to conclude, however, by repeating that despite these two concerns, the Arlington Community Service Board strongly supports the expansion of VHC, and we believe that this agreement will ensure that this expansion will provide very substantial benefits to the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And also, if we may ask that you give a copy of your remarks to our staff, since we couldn't really write down necessarily all of your points, that would be very helpful. Excellent.
That'd be great. Thank you. Are there any other commissions here tonight that wish to be recognized? Okay. Now turn to Commissioner Lentelme for a Transportation Commission report.
The Transportation Commission heard this item yesterday, September 5th, with presentations from the applicant and the staff. The one public speaker opposed the hospital expansion as bad planning and felt that it would turn VHC into a regional facility, bringing more traffic to the site. The commission voted 11-1 to recommend that the county board adopt the plan as recommended by the county manager. The commission expressed appreciation for the transportation changes that have been made over the past few months, specifically the TDM parking cash-out program, the further reduction in both overall number of parking spaces and in above-ground spaces, the widening of George Mason Drive shared use path to 10 feet, the further consolidation of entrances, and the north-south pedestrian connection from 19th Street North. Short of charging employees for parking on a daily basis, the parking cash-out is likely the best option to reduce employee trips by single occupancy vehicles. Several commissioners expressed concern that the parking cash-out program may stop short of offering employees actual cash in lieu of parking space, potentially limiting it to bike share memberships, transit smart benefits, and the like. Those commissioners urged the applicant to make it a true cash-out program, as many folks are changing modes from day to day, not sticking with a single mode every day to get to work, and there is little to offer cyclists and pedestrians other than cash to help shoulder the financial burden of their commute. Multiple commissioners were concerned about the applicant's future plans for the site and how little information has been made known about them. Specifically, they felt that this project would seriously benefit from being a phased development site plan where the community and the commissions could better understand and ensure that what is built today would continue to serve the community well when meshed with future plans. The failure to properly account for these future plans through a PDSP was the stated reason for the lone dissenting vote on the commission. That's the Transportation Commission's report.
Thank you, Mr. Lentelmi. All right, so we're now going to go to public speakers. Ms. Johnson will be calling names 2 at a time. So when your name is called, please come to the podium. If you're the second name called, please come up to this seat behind Ms. Bowling, next to Mr. Shriver, so we can try to move through our speakers in an efficient manner.
Mr. Vice Chair? Mr. Vice Chair?
Yes.
Might I ask, Mr. Vice Chair, if we might ask the clerk exactly how many people we currently have on the roster, just for all those in the audience?
Just about to do that, Commissioner Hughes. Madam Clerk, how many?
We have 20 speakers.
20 speakers?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So, Madam Clerk, can you call the first 2 names?
Okay. Our first speaker is Naomi Verdugo, followed by Jan Rothstein.
I am Naomi Verdugo, and I am here tonight speaking on behalf of Arlington Mental Health Alliance and our allies. Some are here tonight. We are deeply concerned that as yet there is no community benefit for the 42,000 Arlington residents under age 18. We are asking that Virginia Hospital Center fund 2 clinicians for the Children's Regional Crisis Response Program, what we call CR2. I understand there are some who believe that funding for clinicians does not belong in a site plan, yet some of the CSB negotiated conditions that we just heard about are similar and have already been agreed to and approved by the county attorney. CR2 sends a clinician to children in our region who are in a psychiatric or substance abuse crisis, whether at home or at school. A clinician de-escalates the child and wraps up to 45 days of treatment around that child and links them to continuing services. 90% of the children are able to be kept in their home. When CR2 is not available, and in 23% of the cases of the calls, it is not for lack of clinicians, then the police are called and the child is likely to be handcuffed and hospitalized or detained. So we are asking VHC to fund 2 additional clinicians for this contract that Arlington maintains for the region. As a nonprofit hospital, Virginia Hospital Center is required by the IRS to provide community benefit in exchange for exemptions from federal, state, local, and property taxes and other benefits. Clinicians for CR2 would be such a community benefit. The Affordable Care Act also requires that nonprofit hospitals assess community health needs and adopt an implementation strategy to meet the identified needs. VHC has conducted these community health needs assessments in 2011, 2014, and 2017. In all 3 years, mental illness was identified as the top health concern and the top unmet need, and substance abuse the second-rated concern. Clinicians for CR2 would help address these needs. Arlington children are not immune from mental illness or substance abuse, both conditions addressed by CR2. For example, the Arlington 2017 Youth Risk Behavior Survey found about 340 APS high school students attempted suicide in the previous year. CR2 represents early intervention. By treating children early, CR2 can help reduce the use of more intensive and costlier services down the road. The cost of this request is $200,000 per year for a total of $1 million over the 5 years of the site plan. But VHC has the means to cover this expense. their 990, their public IRS filing, shows that they had excess revenues in 2016 of $66 million. That is what we'd call profit if they weren't a nonprofit. They had investments in securities and non-securities of over $733 million. Their parking garage alone earned $2.7 million. 2 additional clinicians for CR2 will benefit a wide swath of Arlington and is a benefit Arlington Mental Health Alliance and our allies would like to see. We strongly encourage the Planning Commission to include the 2 sentences at the bottom of this page in the site plan, so VHC will fund 2 clinicians for the Children's Regional Crisis Response. And I gave copies of my statement so you can see what those 2 sentences are. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jan Rothstein is followed by Suzanne Brown.
I'm actually Janice Rothstein. My wife Jan asked me to speak tonight. I'm a member of the community. I attended most of the SPRC meetings, and I would say that I heard a lot of comments over that meeting that were pretty consistent about how traffic wasn't being properly addressed, how bulking and particularly closeness to the curb wasn't being addressed, and the plan seems a little bit different tonight, but I've seen the plan sort of I've seen the hospital talk about changes to the plan and they're not really changing. And I read this quote from today's Sun Gazette, and the hospital seems to agree with me. Adrian Stanton is quoted as saying that while there has been a couple of minor tweaks to the proposal in the summer, it is for the most part unchanged from what has been submitted earlier. And I think, like most of the community, I don't object to the hospital expansion. I don't object to the hospital. I think the plan is very different from what they first talked about at the beginning of this process. But I think currently it is just out of scale with the neighborhood. And I also think that while concentrating everything on that property is maybe good for the hospital, it's not so good for the community. As they pointed out tonight, there has been a loss of health care throughout the community, and putting everything in this one little corner of North Arlington doesn't seem like what is best for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rothstein.
Suzanne Brown is followed by Wilma Jones.
Yes, hi. I'm Suzanne Brown. I'm the president of Terratown HOA. We are 12 townhouses located across the street from the Edison Street property. There are 40 residents that live on our property. We have 30 vehicles on the property, and to get in and out of our parking lot, we would have to, the opening to where the new campus would be about 100 feet from where our opening is, and there would be a traffic light there. So we've got a number of concerns. I could spend a lot of time and make a big list of all the things that we're worried about as residents there, but I'm going to focus on 2 things because of time. And the first is 1,740 cars. It's hard to wrap our heads around that amount of vehicles in a residential community and in residential neighborhoods. I don't understand. Arlington has spent millions of dollars and priding themselves on being green and for the environment. Many of the roads around the area have been reduced from 2 lanes to 1 lanes with bike lanes everywhere. There are speed bumps. There are traffic calming circles, there are pedestrian walkways, all in an effort to promote walking and biking and commuting and taking the bus. So how can you not worry about 1,740 more cars? Even if you put the parking garage totally underground, that number is still the same. It's still the same number. That's car pollution, that's traffic. That's noise. That's concern for getting across George Mason Drive and other streets in the community, Harrison Street, 16th Street, 19th Street, all of these streets. And so we've got real worries about all these cars. The second thing I would say, the second issue, is the outpatient pavilion building itself. The building is at the outer edge of the property. When you look at the other buildings along George Mason Drive, the 1715 Doctors Building, the 1701 building, the 1635 building, those setbacks are 70 to 75 feet away from the curb. There's a campus road in front of some of those buildings. There's a parking lot in front of some of those buildings, so it gives you the sense of space and distance. This building is smack in front of us. It's going to be right in front of our homes. And it's going to be towering, taking away privacy, sunlight, space, and all of those things that are important to people that are living in the neighborhoods around this. This is a residential community. So those are the things that are really worrisome to us. And so I would just ask, we had hoped when the hospital presented their drawings that the building would look similar to what the campus already looks like on the south side. And this doesn't look like it at all. And so we just would like the same consideration like the other homes have gotten on the other side, because there's twice as many houses that are affected on the north side by these brick walls than there are on the south side. And so that's, as I said, those are the main concerns of what we have. And, you know, I just would appreciate if people could just, again, write that number, 1,740, on the top of your notes, and just think about what kind of an impact that's going to have to all of these homes. And just one little side note, an outpatient pavilion, doctor's offices, an outpatient surgery center does not need to be next to an inpatient hospital. The hospital should focus on ER, ICU, labor and delivery, get those people there as fast as possible. They need help as quick as possible. By putting an outpatient center there, you're going to slow those commutes down for those people that need to get help fast. And again, the hospital has other properties that they can build on for outpatient services. So we just would appreciate you keeping that in mind. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Wilma Jones-Kilgo is followed by Sharon Dorsey.
Hello, my name is Wilma Jones-Kilgo. I am starting my third term as president of the Highview Park, Halls Hill neighborhood, the John M. Langston Citizens Association. I know the hospital talked about they've been in the neighborhood for 73 years. The architectural firm's been in Arlington for 100 years. Well, I'm a fourth generation Arlington resident. My great-grandmother, Elizabeth King, came to Cherrydale in the 1880s as a former slave. She moved to 1923 North Dinwiddie Street in 1910. My niece and her children are the fifth and sixth generations of my family living on Halls Hill, 1 block away from where this expansion would be. Now, we support the expansion. We do not support the current proposed design. And I want to state that if the hospital had worked with us over the past 3 years to move the mass of buildings toward the interior, which is the primary thing that we are asking, we would have supported their request in May, and we would not be here in September. Now, I want to say that I'm supporting the same things that Sharon and Tracy are going to be talking about. We're all on the VHC Neighborhood Task Force. But because of my role as such a long person who's been a resident of this community, I wanted to give you some background because there's some things about Arlington Hospital's relationship with Halls Hill that you may not be aware of. This property was purchased from the Sealock Dairy in 1935. About 3 years later, there was a proposed planning program that was failed, but it was to move all of the Halls Hill residents to Green Valley. And if we want documentation, I have the John M. Langston Citizens Association history with me. I can make copies for you. The hospital opened in 1944. They refused to provide any services to black people. In 1944, the voters approved a referendum to give the Negro children in Halls Hill a playground. The hospital came out in 1946 and in 1948. The Washington Post documents that Gilbert L. Hall, president of the Arlington Hospital Board and chairman of the executive committee, spoke against the play area, as did Dr. John H. Gillian. The hospital's reason was a harassing effect on the hospital from Negro children playing in the lot across the street. The John M. Langston Citizens Association documents at least 5 occasions when medical doctors and facilities associated with the hospital tried to put convalescent homes, nursing homes, and other medical campus buildings against the zoning in our neighborhood, and the John M. Langston Citizens Association had to fight it. As late as 1960, no black babies could be born in the hospital. The Congress of Racial Equality picketed the hospital, and only in 1965, when Joe Fisher and 3 new board members who were associated with the Arlingtonians for a Better County became in office, did someone finally hold the hospital accountable to the black residents of the community, and they told them that they would lose their funding if they could not prove that they were moving forward toward integration. Just as an example, at that time, if a white person refused to share a semi-private room, the black patient was moved to the hallway. And the poor treatment continues today. Staff spent 5 minutes talking about the landscaping that was promised to us in 2004, which has consistently been failed to be upkept. On June 11th, I brought this up at every one of those meetings that I went to at the hospital. On June 11th, I personally spoke with Adrian at the Langston School about this issue. I also informed him that I was the new president of the Civic Association. On June 18th, I received an email from Adrian saying that they had updated their request and they were going to do something about our landscaping. Why did it take so long? Why can our neighborhood not be given the same considerations as the neighborhoods on the other side of the hospital? Now, despite the sketchy treatment, we support this expansion. Why? Because we're Arlington residents and your patient experience impacts us as well. But first of all, we live in this neighborhood, and the changes approved for this expansion will be a part of my neighborhood until my 3-year-old niece grows up. Our problem with the expansion is the massive parking and outpatient buildings, the traffic and safety, and just let me point out two things. The hospital has skewed the facts in their favor tonight on 2 things. The north and south, inpatient and outpatient on either side, is because that condo in the middle, they don't own. The other thing about the setbacks that were raised were because of the setbacks at the tallest end, not the 30 and 40 to the end. We ask you, please have the hospital come back and work with us. We're ready to work with them.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Sharon Dorsey is followed by Tracy Greener.
Ms. Dorsey.
Good evening, Commissioner. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Sharon Dorsey, former president of Waycroft Woodland Civic Association, also its representative on the Neighborhood Task Force for this site plan. Sorry, I'm short. But my time is going. Okay. As you can see, I'm also a user of the hospital's on-site services. Waycroft Woodlawn has been very active, not only recently on the site plan, but also the last one, completed in 2004. To understand where our concerns are on the current site, you need to know some of the history, particularly on the 2004 project. Essentially, the original plan of that project showed the building massing pushed the edges on the corner perimeter of the property at Edison Street and 16th Street, with limited setbacks. In addition, the entry to the hospital was to be on 16th Street, a residential street. We lobbied the county and the hospital and were successful to have the building moved to the center of the property with the entry on North George Mason Drive, a major arterial in the county. We were also able to negotiate berms and landscaping to limit sound and light from our homes. Moving massing to the center of a site and tapering away from homes in a suburban community are design guidelines of Arlington County. We had hoped after the community uproar in 2004 that this site plan would start where we left off in 2004. Instead, we again faced massing pushed to the perimeter with single-family homes across the street from the building massing. This is exactly what they did in their initial site plan in 2004. Wilma already told you what we want, the 3 major themes, so I won't go over that. Our civic association, Waycroft Woodlawn, abuts the southern portion of the hospital campus, and there are many issues that have plagued our neighbors. Noise, light and ambient, traffic and pedestrian safety, smoking in the neighborhoods, aesthetics, and environment. We're also concerned with design. Why? Because what gets approved for this site plan will only be the starting point for the next and the next and the next as the hospital redevelops the middle part of the campus that has aging infrastructure. VHC's track record for future growth and site design is not stellar. You might ask me why I think this. Today, Virginia Hospital Center incorporates buildings from 1957, 1963, 1972, 1983, 1995, and 2004 and looks it, each with its own unique design and placement. The last time VHC looked like an integrated whole in the neighborhood was 1957. If you've ever tried to walk inside the buildings from the south side of the hospital to the north side, you have to go through a maze of intersecting hallways. Most of us get lost. The neighbors and commissions in the county are being asked to accept and approve a site plan without all the data at this point. It is wholly incomplete with only the Edison Street site fleshed out. It's like being asked to write a book review having only been given one chapter and not knowing the rest of the story. At this site is part of a whole that will be in a continuous state of development over the next few decades. Why did the county not, in the Memorandum of Understanding, require the hospital to go through a phased development site plan? The commitment of a PSP in the next phase is too late because precedents will already be set. Be that as it may, while we do support the expansion of the hospital to meet the needs of our growing county, we do not support approval of the site plan as it is. We ask for a 3-month or more deferral requiring either a new design or major modifications to the current design, moving the massing to the middle, undergrounding more, and be more creative about an open chair without having to build another structure on the Edison site to facilitate logistics for a new future construction. We know what will be built if this site plan is approved as it currently stands, and ask you to think about it before you vote. What is the harm in deferring? Think about walking out your front door to be greeted by a 6 to 7-story building across the street. We don't live in DC. Neighborhoods like ours are in jeopardy as development continues to encroach on our properties. We can do better, and a deferral can get us to an acceptable common ground as we work together. Arlington County and the neighborhoods deserve something they can all be proud of and live with for generations. Thank you.
Tracy Grainer is followed by Michael Bruce.
Welcome, Mr. Grainer.
Good evening, Commissioners. Tracy Greiner, a 20-year resident of the Halls Hill neighborhood and currently the chair of the Neighborhood Task Force comprised of the 3 surrounding communities of the John M. Langston Citizens Association, Terra Leeway Heights Civic Association, and Waycroft Woodlawn Civic Association. And I want to make it very clear again on behalf of all 3 that the majority of the residents within these boundaries totally support some sort of sensible expansion of the Edison Street property by VHC. We are fully aware of all the benefits the services, the hospital services to the whole of Arlington. VHC is a private business, but it is a community service provider that many of our residents use, as does the rest of Arlington and beyond Arlington. And yes, we are an unofficial task force formed 3 years ago by our then sitting Civic Association presidents who sought and got support from the county manager and Adrian Stanton of Virginia Hospital Center to work with the hospital on what would end up being built and the effects of the neighborhood. Even though some of our members have changed, the core agenda have always been the building and massing, placement, traffic, pedestrian safety, sense of being within the community. The current site plan amendment lacks all 3. In early 2016, the task force put together 3 community meetings to assist the hospital in hearing what the communities would like to see or not see. In almost 3 years since the list was created, many of the core items are still wanting by the surrounding neighborhoods. Throughout the SPRC process, these items were voiced time and time again and continually fell on the deaf ears within the hospital. Several requests by the task force for the VHC team to sit down with a small group of stakeholders to work together went rebuffed. The task force has sat down with Adrian several times and made it clear that the current site plan was something not supported by our communities, and it always boiled down to patient experience dictates what we build. As of to date, the hospital is only currently offering to entertain any community requests. VHC touts over 100+ changes to the site plan, but only 2 are possible a result of the community, and both still come up short. An overbearing garage is designed for patient experience, but 3/4 of the parking spaces are reserved for campus employee use only. The garage is actually 2 separate garages within. VHC quotes studies showing patients don't like to park on ramps, but the hospital is forcing them to park on the ramps while the employees do not. How does that contribute to the patient experience? Setbacks were increased for both the proposed office and garage, but it still ends up being a 2-block-long mega structure along 19th Street and Edison Street. The newly promoted pedestrian walkway from 19th Street is through the garage, crossing travel lanes, and then through the outpatient pavilion before you encounter any open green space. The plan continually fails to utilize the full potential of the Edison Street property for undergrounding and walkable green space. It was great to see VHC go above and beyond to get support of several county commissions, but do not seem concerned with their immediate neighbors who are affected by their past, current, and future bad decisions. While it was nice to yet see a different master plan at the transportation hearing last night, it was quickly labeled conceptual when the commissioners started to ask about it. Many issues may have been resolved early on if VHC had only taken the additional steps of doing a phased plan development from the get-go. Over the last couple of years, we've heard many things from many people regarding the proposed site plan. Everything from VHC pulling the plug if the plan is not approved to the entire VHC entity being sold once the project is complete. Looking at the Edison Street property and what is proposed from a commercial real estate standpoint, the property is being developed to be a standalone campus to be eventually separated by a ring roadway and could be sold off if and when the aging campus is redeveloped and there is no longer a need for this property. This would be a shame, as a lot of people have contributed a lot of time to this plan. There should be no reason that this cannot be a win for the 3 civic associations, the county, and VHC. The opportunity to truly show other cities that a hospital can work within a residential neighborhood and truly push the envelope of a suburban hospital becoming an urban one is definitely being missed here. If the hospital listened to the 3 CAs and came up with a plan that worked for all in the summer of 2017, they could have been on their way breaking ground this far. We're not obstructionists. All we're asking for is a deferral to bring the hospital back to the table. Thank you.
Michael Bruce is followed by Ron Oberblink.
Mr. Bruce.
Mr. Bruce.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name's Michael Bruce. I'm a resident of the Waycroft Woodlawn area. I was actually president of the WWCA during the tower expansion. I'm also a member of the neighborhood task force. I think people do agree that we need medical facilities, especially in areas such as the South County that are lacking facilities with closure of past facilities. But I think the process we've gone through over the past couple of years, and this is representative, we've asked for a dialogue with the hospital. I don't need to reiterate items others have brought up, but we would like to address issues with the dialogue in a proactive manner, in a manner, and I've actually brought this up to Adrian. I'm in the management consulting business, a design thinking approach where we're interactive. We can share ideas and see them, what would be the results, what are our viewpoints immediately. Instead, we've had presentations and, we haven't had a dialogue since the beginning. I'm concerned also that Parks and the Parks Committee brought up a lot of the environmental concerns. In fact, I've had a dialogue with Adrian, and I could read you what he wrote me. Langston Brown had a concern over stormwater. The engineers, we actually exchanged information in writing. They're supposed to send me stormwater management plans. Never got them until I had to get with Adrian just yesterday to remind him to send me that information. I bring that up because The parking garage is not meant to be LEED certified. They're not using green roofs and other things that are being used in county facilities like Discovery Elementary that residents applaud the design of. With that, I would ask that you ask the hospital to come back to the community, address the community's concerns concerning mass, concerning what's the future going to be. The green space, as we've seen it, is supposed to be built on in the future. It's not going to be there forever. So I ask you to let's take one more look at this, and let's make sure that we do have a dialogue and we can address the issues that are about traffic, building, mass, as well as providing services to the county, in a county that needs services, especially in the south. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce.
Ron Oberbilling is followed by Glenn Tobin.
Do I have 3 or 5?
5.
Okay, great, thank you. Good evening, my name is Ron Oberbillig. I'm president of the Terra Manor Homeowners Association. We're located to the west of George Mason. Part of the development is across from the current campus, and part of the development is across from the proposed campus on the Edison property. We've lived there for 14 years, since 2005. We knew coming into the community that there would be certain challenges being close to an institution like Virginia Hospital Center. Challenges like traffic, ambulances, trash, illegal parking in front of our houses, containers of human waste, people trespassing on private property to take a smoke break or wait for a bus. However, I will say we're proud of our community. It's not been intolerable. I think most of those in development feel like it's a tolerable situation. We're proud of the Virginia Hospital Center. I will say I think my wife feels differently. But I'm convinced that we don't need to be forced out of our home just yet. In moving to the community, we were heartened by the county, the community and the hospital working together in the spirit of compromise back in 2004. It preserved a campus-like atmosphere, which is very nice if you've ever driven by. In other words, there was precedent for appropriate setbacks of 60 to 80 feet, as you've heard, and landscaping, plus a ring road to take some of the burden off neighborhood streets. Imagine our disappointment that no similar coming together has occurred in 2018. At the Site Planning Review Committee, county officials shocked representatives with civic associations and homeowners, saying we might get a few tweaks in the site plan, and we needed more than that. But they were exactly correct, and that's all we've achieved at this point in time. In short, the tweaks to architecture and massing have done little to create a campus-like environment on the Edison property. I'd like to highlight a few of the major issues. First of all, zoning guidelines, which you've already heard about, state that, in pertinent part, that building bulk and placement shall be concentrated to have the least negative impact on surrounding neighborhoods. That requires tapering height, bulk, and mass from the center of the site. I don't understand why this is an issue. Hospital and staff comments, unfortunately, seem to me to be a little misleading. Instead of centering the huge parking garage and large outpatient facility on the southern center of the Edison property, bordering the hospital's current property and furthest from the neighborhoods, the hospital decided to leave the space open for a sunken garden, which is actually the future site of a third building on the property, not part of this site plan, and push largely right-angled structures, very uncreative, to the perimeter as far as possible. Thus, it's impossible to have a campus-like environment. It's impossible. With adequate setbacks and landscaping, plus completion of a ring road so helpful on the rest of the property. The hospital has tapered its proposed structures and modestly improved setbacks. But as you've heard, it's still a tall, block-long brick wall all the way from Edison to George Mason, unlike any other structure on the building now or at any time in the future. No wonder those on 19th Street are so concerned. Not only that, the hospital proposes to further commercialize the neighborhood by building its nearly 100-foot tall outpatient building, not over the more desirable sunken garden area, but at the corner of 19th and George Mason for many of its neighbors to stare at all day. Staff, unfortunately, doesn't think it's a significant concern because it's across the street. That's what they put in their report. Next issue, traffic. I refuse to believe any of you would be all that enthusiastic about a few more thousand cars coming into your neighborhoods. It's not going to be pleasant, especially at first, but we'll work through it. but how many of you would like the county to create a new intersection right in front of your house? The county and hospital have already destroyed a couple of families and their property values in building their main entrance right off of George Mason in the middle of the block. There was no street. It's a flawed approach to be avoided at all costs. Signals were just stuck in a front yard. You've got a horizontal metal piece with signals on it that crosses your property. It's a very undesirable situation. The county recognizes that, but defers to the hospital. And I'll explain why just a little bit later. But the key point is the hospital wants to do it again. Just a few hundred feet from their main entrance intersection in our development, they want to build another such intersection. The staff agrees it's a bad idea, but defers to hospital preferences. The homeowner or homeowners most affected live next door to me and are incensed. You'll hear from one of them a little bit later on, and it gets worse. The hospital doesn't want anyone coming to the outpatient facility to turn their car either to the right or left because they might get confused or there might be a queue. So many of us along George Mason are going to get the view of this expansive drop-off plaza with a huge parking garage in the background. In a proper site plan, we would be looking at trees or evergreens, which of course is highly preferable.
Thank you, Mr. Billy.
We ask for a deferral. Thank you very much.
Glenn Tobin is followed by Mario Wlodarski.
Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Glenn Tobin, and I'm here representing my wife and myself, who were residents of Arlington for 10 years. Unlike many of the other comments, we're not direct neighbors of the hospital, and we wanted to focus our comments in a little different direction than that. We're deeply concerned about maintaining a high-quality natural environment in Arlington County. A project of this size can either create environmental problems or alleviate them down the road. And we reviewed in detail the most recent plans that were made available on the county website, and we believe that the plan should incorporate two very concrete changes. And they are, number one, the facility should shift to a green roof type of design, and number two is that the planting schedules that the hospital center is utilizing should actually shift to utilize native plant species. And let me just comment on each of those two in turn. First, regarding the shift to green roofs, there's an accelerating trend in hospital construction around green roofs, which, as I'm sure as many of you know, are kind of creating plants on the roofs. This provides greater insulation to the building, reduces heating and cooling costs. Of importance to the county, they also reduce stormwater runoff, reducing pressure on the local watersheds during rain events. While somewhat more expensive to implement, studies show very attractive returns on investment from these types of roofs for large buildings such as these. Hospitals in particular have embraced such construction as a way to supplement their mission of healing and likely to improve their marketing ability to attractive constituencies as well. Local hospitals have recently incorporated green roofs in new construction, include Johns Hopkins, Sibley Memorial, Inova Women's and Inova Children's, and the Adventist Shady Grove Hospital as well. No, that's not a complete list. If anyone's interested, I brought information that came from Sibley's website regarding their recent LEED Gold expansion, and from their reckoning, the green roofs prevent 310,000 gallons per year of entering the stormwater sewers each year, which again is a big concern to Arlington here. Secondly, regarding the native plants, we reviewed the planning plans that were provided by VHC and believe that much improvement is possible. While some earlier documentation made a nod to utilizing existing plants, the latest plans include multiple species of non-native trees, shrubs, ground cover, et cetera. I'm specifically referencing page L-503 of the Landscape 1 tab of the August 6th, 2018 plans. And we think tree plantings like this should be considered, 100-year events and really should merit much greater scrutiny. Alternative native species are available in all cases, and there's a broad community here that could help in that regard.
Thank you. Mr. Tribbin, if you have materials, if you could leave it with the clerk, okay. That'd be great.
Mario Wlodarski is followed by Jim Jerez.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Mario. I live straight across from the Arlington Hospital.
I've been a resident of Arlington since 1974. My first flat was around the corner here where the Arlington Trust Company was, and the rent was $110. I live now straight across from where it's going to be the main entrance to this new facility. I have driven Lee Highway from Roslyn to 66, George Mason all the way up to 50, Wilson Boulevard from Roslyn to Seven Corners. There is no other intersection where there is 4 ways and the 4th leg is a house. And that's what the Arlington Hospital is going to give me in front of my driveway. I don't know if everybody has heard about light pollution. It is described as an unwanted light that enters somebody's property. For example, by shining unwanted light into the bedroom window of a person who's trying to sleep. There's only 2 bedrooms facing George Mason. There's also a living room. There's also a garage. Some of my neighbors know me as a bike man because I've gone up and down George Mason with 3 kids, so I know the neighborhood very, very well. Now, this is not acceptable to me because the hospital is asking for your permission. I have the right to tranquility in my house without 3,000 cars shining their lights on us, even more if somebody happens to go in and out twice. This is not permissible to me. Now, the hospital wants to expand, but I see a lot of wants and needs. The first number that called my attention was 4,500 babies. 80% of them are from the county. So the other 20% still going to be 4,500, and the county grows by about 1.2% every year. And that out of 240,000, rounding the number would be 3,600.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a lot more, but 3 minutes is not enough.
Jim Jerez is followed by Salvi Conrad.
Mr. Harris?
VHC planning should be taken in the context of what's actually occurring in the county today. Transportation. The actual intent of the county's car-free diet is to pack as many vehicles of all types in as little space as possible. Arlington is actually a welcoming community for many thousands more motor vehicles via express lanes, expanded motor vehicle sales, large new residential and commercial parking garages. There is no comprehensive countywide traffic impact analysis planned by DES and no multimodal traffic safety plan. There is little or no enforcement of the county's traffic ordinances by ACPD, except as they relate to autos and occasionally motorcycles. Last night, the Transportation Commission approved a TMP for bicycles and electric mobility vehicles, e.g. scooters, that will add hundreds of unregulated 2-wheel vehicle trips to the hospital's sidewalks, parking lots, and access roads, and to the streets and sidewalks in neighborhoods around the hospital. DES transportation staff and a majority of Transportation Commission members continually promote more bicycles in Arlington with little or no regulation of bicyclists. VHC is already being marketed as a regional hospital, including to Alexandria, Falls Church, McLean, and Great Falls residents. Arlington's population is increasing by at least 2,500 per year. How many patients will this regional hospital actually serve? This regional hospital actually serve? Arlington's new urbanist planning paradigm has gentrified the workforce housing out of Westover, Lee Highway, Ballston, Cherrydale, contributing to a significant traffic increase by hospital employees. Lee Highway will become another Clarendon, no matter what Arlington government says to the contrary. The neighborhoods around the hospital are being infilled with upscale homes, and neighborhood streets were never designed for a high volume of multimodal traffic. More neighborhoods sacrificed to the county government's new urbanism. Arlington as a regional services provider for the region, no matter what the consequences. There's a solution to this problem. Put this community hospital for McLean residents, Great Falls residents, Drainsville residents, Sterling residents, in Nan Walsh's backyard in McLean. Thank you.
Salve Conrad is followed by Betsy France.
Good evening. My name is Salve Conrad. I've been a resident and property owner in Arlington County for over 25 years. I have worked at Virginia Hospital Center for 15 years, and I'm an assistant director in our Information Services Division, delivering state-of-the-art healthcare information technology. I am quite proud of the technology that supports Virginia Hospital Center as a crucial aspect of patient care, and that includes our recent rollout of our Epic electronic medical record system that gives our clinicians the most robust access to patient data across our entire enterprise. I firmly believe the VHC expansion should move forward in order to make our technology available to as many people as possible. In 2014, thanks to the 3D mammogram imaging in our women's imaging department, I was diagnosed with breast cancer at the very early stages. After my surgery, my treatment plan was just a 5-day course of radiation. It was a very precise and targeted radiation, thanks to our brachytherapy system and our radiation oncology department. Then I just had to rest and recover. This is just a few technology examples that helped me, and in the end, I had an excellent outcome. I know that each case can be different and complex, but as an advocate for early detection, I believe the hospital expansion could help many more patients toward their own excellent outcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Conrad.
Betsy France is followed by Tina Gonzalez.
Ms. France.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Betsy France, and I'm a 35-year resident of Arlington. I live across the street from the hospital in the same house that I've lived in all 35 years, where my husband Scott and I have raised our 3 children and 2 dogs. I've spent my professional career in Arlington, and I absolutely love Arlington. I'm in full support of the expansion of the hospital for 3 key reasons. First, I want the best health care possible for our community. This cannot happen in the current state of the hospital. The hospital must be expanded. Arlingtonians deserve the best health care possible. Second, I want a strong and vibrant Arlington. A key component of a strong community is a top-notch hospital. We must have a state-of-the-art hospital in order to attract businesses and residents to our community. Finally, I love that our hospital gives back. I truly believe in my core that all Arlingtonians should have access to the best health care possible. And last year, as you heard, it bears repeating, Virginia Hospital Center gave back over $40 million in medical care to cover our community's most vulnerable, $40 million. Commissioners, I can't stress enough how important it is to move forward now with this project. There's been a lot of conversation in the community. Voices have been heard. This expansion is critical to our future in Arlington, and it cannot wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. France.
Tina Gonzalez is followed by Rita Jensen.
Quadruple bypass surgery, cardiac catheterization, pacemakers, thyroid cancer, breast cancer, broken bones, multiple sclerosis, emergency room services, outpatient surgery services, cyberknife radiation treatment, interventional radiology, nuclear medicine, MRIs, arthroscopic surgery, hysterectomy, respiratory therapy, lupus, stroke, inpatient rehab, physical therapy, lab services, birth and death. My name is Tina Gonzalez, and these are some of the services that have been provided to me and my immediate family here at Virginia Hospital Center. We have been Arlington residents for over 60 years, and without the continued vision, state-of-the-art services, exemplary staff, convenient location, and care we receive and know we would receive, I would have never been able to share 20+ more years with my dad after his life-saving heart surgery, or know in the last months of his life he was treated with compassion, respect, and dignity by every person he was seen by. My niece and nephew would not have their mom this day if it wasn't for the brilliant work of so many members of our staff and departments during her multiple breast cancer journeys. I stand here not only as a resident of Arlington, but also as an employee of 32 years who loves and is passionate about this facility and who would not have her family go anywhere else. I was here 9/11 when we were the only facility that first responders could get to. I witness every day the exceptional gifts and talents of our physicians and staff, as well as the services that change lives. I'm afraid without the continued growth and expansion of our services and facility, we will not be able to continue to advance and bring the state-of-the-art technology to meet the needs of this growing and diverse community. We will not attract the best employees, which are the future of our success. We need a structure to support this growth, as well as the benefit and convenience of parking on site, not only for our staff, but our patients. With my close relationship with our recruitment team, this is often a turning point when applicants consider our facility during the recruitment process. I ask you to please consider approving this project to allow us to move forward in order that our facility can continue to provide the best care, advanced technologies, as well as recruit the greatest talents to provide this care to our families, friends, coworkers in our community. And so it all allows you too the opportunity to make sure you and your loved ones continue to have and be in the best care. Thank you for the opportunity to share this with you.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez.
Rita Jensen is followed by Kelsey Bathurst.
Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. How are you? My name is Rita Jensen, and I have been a resident of Arlington for over 45 years. Arlington is a wonderful community that I've enjoyed and been raised in, and I made the decision to raise my family in this community as well. I love Arlington, and I also love Virginia Hospital Center. I'm very proud to say that I have worked at Virginia Hospital Center in this organization for over 20 years. I'm the Director of Employee Benefits and Assistant Director of HR. I have seen over the years that the hospital leadership has worked very hard to develop and grow hospital services to meet the demands of our growing community in Arlington, along with the market area. Along with working at Virginia Hospital Center, my family and I have been longtime patients. My 3 children, ages 9, 11, and 20 years of age, were born at Virginia Hospital Center. It's very close and near and dear to my heart. Everything that can happen to us happens to us when I get home, in the middle of the night, on the weekend, and Virginia Hospital Center has had my back. My 2 favorite services are the Emergency Department and the Urgent Care Center. These are 2 crucial departments that have been there for many illnesses and accidents to take care of my children and I, my mother, my sister, and her family in Arlington, and many of my friends and family, other family members in Arlington as well. Several years ago, my mother had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she did receive the best care at Virginia Hospital Center, starting from our surgical teams the oncology teams, outpatient treatment services, the hospital has been a part of our extended family in more ways than one. I am forever grateful. I believe firmly the expansion is beneficial to our community and region as the county population has continued to grow, and along with the need for these services. This expansion is vital, very vital for our community to have a hospital to support our growing needs. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kelsey Bathurst, followed by Samantha Rocky.
Good evening. My name is Kelsey Bathurst. I'm a graduate of the Leadership Center for Excellence's Young Professionals Program, class of 2013. I'm a Northern Virginia native and have called Arlington home for the majority of my professional career. That professional career has been entirely at Virginia Hospital Center. It's not often that you hear of a millennial who has never job hopped, which is a testament to Virginia Hospital Center leadership and culture. I've been with Human Resources at VHC for the past 7 years and serve our employees as the administrator of our online performance management software system, as well as coordinate and conduct our new hire orientation. In the 7 years I've worked at VHC, I've seen the significant growth of the facility, especially from the HR side. Our hiring and orientation numbers are on a steady increase, and they don't show slowing down. We're an employer of choice. Employees choose to commute past other facilities because they believe in the mission of VHC to be the best health system. By having the best employees, top physicians seek out VHC as a place to practice cutting-edge medicine. In order to retain these top performers and physicians, we need to have the ability to offer the best benefits and incentives, including on-site parking for all. Having to commute past other hospitals, just a shuttle an additional 20 minutes each way, is a huge dissatisfier for our healthcare team, especially working 12-hour shifts on their feet all day. If a top employee chooses to work at another facility because they have a shorter commute that doesn't involve a shuttle bus, VHC loses a valuable team member, spends resources training replacements, and has the potential to lose the physician or medical staff member that that employee supported. Unless you're having a baby, typically your visit to our campus isn't for a happy reason. At Virginia Hospital Center, the needs of our patients come first. Sometimes that need is as simple as finding a parking spot as they arrive to visit a loved one, or to arrive for an appointment where they may be getting a tough diagnosis. The least we can do is ensure that they can arrive to their destination without inciting greater anxiety. As I mentioned, I'm of the millennial generation, a generation that Arlington struggles to retain as long-term residents. I would love to stay an Arlington resident for years to come, and part of my decision to stay in the area is that Virginia Hospital Center can continue to meet the needs of the growing community by expanding and continuing to practice patient-centric, world-class medicine. Please join me in supporting Virginia Hospital Center's current plans to expand our campus for both our immediate and future needs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Samantha Rocky is followed by Gwendolyn Beck.
Ms. Rocky?
Gwendolyn Beck is followed by Cornelia Lesh. Are these made-up names? Okay. Jetta Berra. Jim O'Shea.
Mr. O'Shea?
No paper, so this will be short. My mom spent a significant amount of this year in the hospital, and tomorrow she's moving to a hospice, and I'm probably going to say goodbye to her by the end of this year. My daughter-in-law is, on the other hand, is going to give birth to her grandson probably in a couple of weeks at Virginia Hospital. My wife has surgery tomorrow at Virginia Hospital. Hospital is important. So for all the people that just talked, yeah, please don't get rid of the hospital. Okay, yeah, but that's not what this is about. We live right across the street from the hospital. We're proud of it. We live close to the hospital because we can get care, we can walk to our doctor, and that's a good thing. But you're building a garage right across the street from us. Not not as we asked 2 or 3 years ago to put it in the center of the property. So, okay, we'll take that in consideration, but you're putting it right at the edge of the property, right across the street from our house. And that's what we're going to live with for the rest of our lives as long as we're in the house. The thing that upsets me the most about the meetings that we've attended is every time I hear what a glorious and a wonderful hospital this is going to be. It's going to be better than Fairfax. We're going to be the best around. Just support us as a community. You know, we want to have our children get born, and we want to be healthy when we bring our children there. I want my wife to be okay when she goes and has her surgery tomorrow. But to try to think about these glorious plans to bring in the entire area into this garage across the street from us, all night long we're going to be hearing these cars. All night long these cars are going to be coming in and out. This is, again, like the gentleman said, it's not being built in McLean. It's been built in Arlington. It's been built in our community. And that's why we implore you to listen to what Wilma said, is that we want this to be in the center. Put this garage in the center. I mean, that was never even considered. By the time we already started seeing plans, it was already across the street from us. So I don't support the current plan. No. And I'm tired of hearing about how angry the people are around the campus, that they don't understand how important the hospital. The hospital is very important. We need it. But just listen to the people who live next to you. It doesn't have to be the way it is. I know it may be too late, but consider that there may be a better plan. Thank you.
Is that our final speaker? All right. Do commissioners need a break, or do you want to keep going? Good? 5? All right, we'll take a 5-minute break, I think, and then we'll come back and we'll have commissioner questions. I want to thank everybody here for coming out to speak to us. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us this evening to share your thoughts on the different sides of this project. Like I said at the outset, we will be having our deliberations on Tuesday evening, so if you're free, you can join us then at 7 o'clock. Like I said at the opening, we will not be taking public comment at that meeting as we took it this evening. You can also watch it from the comfort of your own home. As Commissioner Yakimini just mentioned to me, it will be streamed live, and so you can do that as well. And encourage you all to also attend the county board meeting later this month to share your thoughts with them. So thank you all for coming, and we do appreciate it.
Okay, I'm going to ask. So.
All right, we're going to come back to order. If people could take their seats. Anybody having conversations, that they could take them out into the hall. All right. So thank you for your patience in us taking a short break. I'm going to turn now to Commissioner Giacomini, who was our co-chair for this site plan, for sort of a brief overview. She's going to give her full SPRC report on Tuesday, but she's going to give a kind of a brief overview and then maybe clarify the questions and what we're going to be trying to achieve tonight. Commissioner Giacomini.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And even though I know most of our speakers have left, I just wanted to say that we appreciate everybody who comes out and speaks in an evening, and it's good for us tonight that we've actually separated out the speakers and the deliberations, because I think it gave us more space and even the speakers to feel not rushed, and I think that's a good thing all the way around. So we are doing things just a little bit differently. As the chairman has indicated, there is an SPRC report that Jim Lantelmi, who is my co-chair, and I have put out to the members of the commission. I think it's some of the members of the public have it as well. It's a public document. If you care to get a copy of it, I'm sure staff could accommodate you. And I'll go through the full report on Tuesday, because our general practice is that we have the SPRC report, and then that the chairman of SPRC tends to lay out what we see as probable discussion points for the meeting. And then, of course, commissioners add their own, and so we can structure it that way. But this evening, just in order to get a jump on things, I would just say to my colleagues, if you have any questions that have arisen from your reading of the staff report, from testimony you've heard this evening, whether it's from staff, applicant, or citizen, anything that you would like for our consideration on Tuesday to aid us, please, let's go ahead and let our staff know now, so that if something needs to be researched, we can get it. And I would just say that, I think we can hear from the testimony that I think a lot of our discussion will be about planning guidance. We've heard about whether there should or should not have been a PDSP, what kind of documents inform us about this particular site and its placement in a single-family neighborhood. Also, the site organization and massing. We've heard a lot about transportation, parking, access on George Mason Drive. Also, some bit, although we didn't hear as much from the speakers, about architecture. And that's different from the massing, so it's how the buildings appear, materiality, fenestration, things like that, rather than how they are arranged on the site. Also, landscaping and open space. It was mentioned many times at SPRC about the current loading dock and the screening of medical waste and things, which you have heard that I think the applicant wanted to be responsive after hearing all of that, but there is a condition with the height of the fence needing to be done by site plan, because it would be higher in order to be useful than we permit in our zoning code. So those are some of the areas I believe that we will look at on Tuesday. So with that, I'll turn it back to the chair and to monitor your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Giacomini. So as I mentioned, the point of this is to ask questions. We are asking questions, not making statements. A statement is not a question. So we will have full time for statements and opinions on Tuesday. This is to ask the applicant or staff for information for them to both bring back to us on Tuesday evening, so that we can be better informed and have a fulsome discussion. So it is not, both staff and the applicant are not expected at this moment to have a discussion with you or to answer that question here tonight. That being said, I'll open it up to questions. Yes, Commissioner Kieran.
Do you want them in any particular order, or just whatever I've got?
I think right now, whatever you've got.
Okay, I have two questions right now. One has to do with the number of cars, that 1740 figure we heard. Can we get a discussion and understanding of what that looks like? Is that spread in thirds because of the shift work of the hospital? Okay, that's the first one. And the second goes to Mr. Tobin's questions about the landscaping. We've raised this before about site plans and the part in the ordinance that talks about what's planted. Can you give us some reassurance that we are encouraging planting of natives and precluding any non-natives, and that there's been some sort of conference with the urban forester and the landscaping staff? Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Weir.
Thank you. And I guess these are mostly actually going to be directed to the applicant. So two questions, actually, and they're mostly about the garage. Regarding the isometric garage plan on GA 001, it looks like there is a movable barrier, the temporary movable barrier on the P3 tier, but that the barriers are going to be permanent construction separating the patient and staff facilities. And I would like confirmation as to whether the plan is in fact that would be a permanent construction separation on those two tiers. The second question has to do with, since I forgot the second question, I'm going to go to the third and ask Mr. Ladd, can you bring up the last slide of the master plan that we received? Thank you. And I want some insight as to the judgments and decisions that were made about a couple of things. Thank you to Commissioner Gearin for the use of your laser pointer. There's a lot of angst about the location right here of the outpatient center. I would like some insight into the decision to place the outpatient center here as opposed to placing it in this space, which would move it further towards the middle of the site, consistent with zoning and other county practices. And second, I understand why you really can't plan to build anything here at this point because, of course, that's all buildings. But I heard last night Commissioner Lantelmi asked about, I guess this is both my second and third question. Commissioner Lantelmi asked the applicant last night, when the green garage is removed, where do those drivers park? And what I heard you say last night to Commissioner Lantelmi is that you believed that this new garage would have capacity for the cars that are currently using the green garage for parking. And so if that's the case, I guess that my second question is in fact that the case? I remembered. And my third question is, if it is the case, then why did you decide against phasing the construction of the garage, allowing less massing here, and then allowing you to build a less massive building here when you needed it and when the green garage was no longer there obstructing it, allowing the hospital to be responsive to the neighborhood massing concerns? So those are the three questions, and I very much look forward to your answers come Tuesday.
Thank you, Commissioner Weir. Commissioner Morton.
It's on. Thanks. I was happy to see that you had tried to address these concerns about permeability, but I don't really feel like I have a lot of good information to judge the pedestrian experience walking through those north, south, and east-west cut-throughs, so I'd really appreciate seeing more of that detail at the next meeting.
Thank you. Commissioner Iachimini and then Commissioner Lantelmi.
I would like from staff a little more information about Condition 66 that has to do with the mental health, and I think, do we call it COPEN, about applications and how all this works, just to get a better idea. So it seems to me what it indicates is that one just doesn't say, I'm putting in 60 mental health beds. One has to get permission, and how does that work, and how assured are we of that, and plus also the language that was proposed to us this evening, if we could think about that and have a report back on that as to why or why not it might make its way into the condition. Another question I have, and I should know this, but just sort of rhetorical, is that the 95 feet of the outpatient, is that to the top of the penthouse? And if not, how much further is the penthouse? And could we get a drawing of, or even just in profile of the outpatient, as well as the garage side, that indicates the height at every level point, so that it's very clear where the massing is and where the heights are? As we actually saw very few slides tonight of the context, so I think that might be helpful for our discussion.
Thank you. Commissioner Lantelmi.
Following up on Commissioner Morton's question on the permeability, the pathway from 19th Street through the, I believe it'll be through the garage, if we could have a little better feel of physically how that is going to work, how, is it going to be a straight shot? Is it maze-like the rest of the hospital? Is it going to be 24/7 access? Is it climate controlled, or is it just the garage? You know, just what does physically this look like? Because the rendering that we got really doesn't really even show where the entrance is. It's sort of screened by people and the landscaping, so I'm not even sure how big the entrance is to the garage. The east-west also just shows a street and a car. It doesn't quite really show how it gets all the way through from one side of the site to the other. So if we get a better feel for that, you know, it isn't just simply where it is, but just what's the experience. The second question I have is one that has come up at each of the SBRCs, and I don't think we've ever really gotten an answer to it, and that's the possibility of taking better advantage of the topography of this site. Right now, off George Mason, it's already almost one full level below grade going off of George Mason. The way you have the renderings here, it looks as though you're going to be taking a lot of dirt to fill that in order to get to the garage from George Mason. Again, we've raised, why could not that be built on with a structure that could be part of the structure for a garage? It's already dug out. It adds spaces. You have to fill it in anyway in order to get cars from one end to the other. Why fill it with dirt? Why not make those underground parking spots with the access on top of it? And I know you have, it would go through where the empty chair is, but there's lots of buildings that have garages in the basement, so that shouldn't prevent you from building the second building. Okay. Why has that been considered? And if it hasn't been considered, why not? That's my question.
Yes, Commissioner Ricks.
I would follow up on the underground parking question, and just looking at the 300 series drawings, and particularly A301, was there discussion about the potential to, given the logistics of excavation and foundations for the outpatient building, why there's no additional structured parking under it? It would seem like a sort of a natural thing to do and make the whatever above grade parking massing more fungible and malleable.
Any other questions, Commissioner Ricks? Okay, Commissioner McSweeney.
I just wanted to follow up on that parking question and just expand it, not make it quite so specific, perhaps as Mr. Lantelme did, but given the entire site, you know, what prevents you from actually parking under the entire site and using the entire site for parking? I also, on the PDSP that Commissioner Giacomini mentioned, I confess I would look forward to understanding what the advantage would be, what we would gain by a PDSP after this is actually approved, if it's approved. I'm not sure I understand the point, so I would love some additional information on that. I wanted to second the question about the behavioral health, and specifically the comments about the CR2 mobile crisis, and if the applicant is actually open to that at all. And then because the applicant talked quite a bit about the fact that they're the third largest employer in Arlington, I'm interested in understanding how many employees you have that live in Arlington. What is the wage structure like? I mean, are they mostly minimum wage jobs, or are they higher salary positions? And I think it'd be interesting just to understand, you know, how many of them are at what level AMI, if that's possible.
Thank you, Commissioner McSweeney. Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you, Commissioner Scholl. I think Commissioner Giacomini might have already gotten my question, but I'll sort of amplify it. And I'd really like, and I don't want anything new to be created, but I'm looking on currently, I think, what number drawing am I at? Where's the numbers on these ones today? Oh, you're killing me. Where's bottom right? Presentation plan detail 1. And I'm looking at the midpoint setback numbers from the mid-street, and I really feel like we owe it to ourselves and to the community to have a real clear line of both two sort of numbers, if it's easy to produce, the mid-street of the future street section to the first tier and then the second tier of height, and then another measurement point, which is of course the most nearest adjacent property owner's first property line to the first step and then to the next step. And then for our own staff, I think it would also be enlightening for us to have recent approved site plans or use permits. And since this is a use permit or a site plan, it's both, isn't it? We can go with maybe looking at both. So I would think of the Wellington being an excellent use permit in which we also had step back siting that was adjacent to residential single family neighborhoods. And I'm trying to think of a site plan in my head, and there's a recent one, but I can't think of a really good one. So I guess the other non-area site plan that we have recently looked at with regard to step backs and setbacks would be my program, which you can tell it's late, our affordable housing project that we just did. Oh, it's killing me. Thank you, Red Cross. They took down the Red Cross sign now, so I don't see it as I drive by anymore. So the Red Cross site are some of our two most recent ones that I think would be enlightening for a broader community conversation. On that note, that's sort of my other, have one more question, or two more questions really. The next question is a really blunt one for the hospital that I hope they'll be able to answer that I don't think anyone's talked about. I know we brought it up at SPRC, but it's still very relevant, I think, because it matters to every one of your neighbors that they don't yet know about. And the question is, while staff is, of course, trying not to smoke, and I understand that principle, a prohibition on smoking in a suburban campus is something I understand because you have to walk several acres to get to a spot outside of the property. However, in this property, all of the spots are within 100 feet of ending on your property. So my question there is, does the hospital's policy on preventing smoking continue onto the sidewalk on its own property? That's the other question I had. And the final question that I have is for them, if the hospital is willing to, because I plan to make a motion, to define whether or not I'm on condition TDM page 91, the cash out question. It's very carefully worded, I like it, except I don't, that the second sentence says the program shall provide transit subsidy and transit-transportation subsidy. There is a question, and I would like to add, question is, will the applicant be willing to accept dash cash in addition to those two ones in there?
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. While we're on page 91, we heard about this sort of generally tonight, this cash out policy. I would like this to be further fleshed out on Tuesday. Use an example. I'd like to see an example of, what does that mean? What are you talking about in terms of how you're evaluating the cost of space? How frequently is this kind of being used? Just some more details around this. What's envisioned by the applicant? That would be helpful. Commissioner Giacomini and then Commissioner McSweeney.
On Tuesday, I'll want to discuss the different entrance proposals from George Mason using 17th Street North or not, and a little more from staff. I know that in our report, it's staff prefers North 17th Street, but feels that the hospitals can work as well. But I want to explore that a little bit more based on testimony that we received this evening. The other thing is I want to be very clear, and maybe I've missed it in the staff report, is our accounting about open space and landscaped areas in the hospital and exactly where they are and what we're counting, because I know that there had been a discussion about whether we count the sunken garden, which is really the empty chair, or not. And I think that's really important for our discussion and understanding exactly what kind of open space there is in this particular proposal.
Commissioner McSweeney.
This actually might be going to, or may overlap what Commissioner Giacomini was just asking about, but specifically we had testimony from Mr. Ledarsky, who lives across the street and was talking about the impact on his home and perhaps something that's being erected in front of his house. And also that he didn't believe that there were any other comparable situations in Arlington. And I would just wondered if maybe you could comment on that and maybe help us understand exactly what that's going to look like. Thank you.
Any other questions for Tuesday's meeting? All right. I want to thank the applicant and staff for their work today. Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah.
Just to,
Commissioner
I want to just ask a question of you.
Sure.
We're not foreclosing our opportunity to ask further questions come Tuesday, right? Okay.
Not. No, this is an opportunity like we often.
No surprise question.
This is an opportunity like we often do at the end of an SPRC meeting to flag things for next time. That's essentially what we're doing. Yes, we will have more opportunity if
I assumed as much, but if I have to think carefully about other questions, I'll take a moment to do so.
Well, only you, Commissioner Ware. You only get. Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for your presentations tonight, staff for their work. We will see you on Tuesday. We stand in recess until then.
Oh, excuse me, thank you.